out. But what I want to talk about is this was a big weekend for the NFL draft as far as, who's looking good as far as the Senior Bowl and that kind of thing, the East-West Shrine game, the NFL PA game. And I wanted to get into some of the guys that, to me, look good in the Senior Bowl. And I don't know how many people, are following the Senior Bowl, but every year in the Senior Bowl, somebody kind of pops up out of nowhere and is just phenomenal. I mean, really, really good. And this year, of course, it's no different. There's good players in the Senior Bowl again. The guy who I thought really jumped out to me was Taijae Spears from Tulane, who is a small back, but man, with burst. This guy's got unbelievable burst and stop and start quickness, and he's incredibly sudden. And I thought, I saw him at Tulane. He looked good at Tulane with the wave. He had 2,900 yards plus over 4 years there. And just, this is a guy who runs with a lot of power and a lot more power than you would think. He's 5'10, 204 pounds. Now, the Niners with Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell, they probably don't need a running back, but man, this guy is something else. Dominated against SC in the Cotton Bowl. He had 205 yards on 17 carries, including 4 touchdowns, and then went off in the AAC game, title game against Central Florida. He ran for almost 200 yards that day on 22 carries. So really exciting little back, 5'10", 204 pounds, but just great vision, really low center of gravity. And if you watched, Taijae Spears in the practices, really impressive. I mean, really impressive. The ability to break tackles and to move the pile. And he's a little back, so he's probably going to be there on day 3. But man, watch out for him. Taijae Sharp really looked good, I thought, this week in Mobile. And I don't know that he looked great in the actual Senior Bowl game itself, but just watching the practices during the week, he looked really, really good. Another guy who I wanted to see this week, because he was a great college football player, and I'm kind of wondering what's he going to be in the NFL, and that's Riley Moss from Iowa, the Iowa cornerback. And I don't know that he's a cornerback in the NFL. He might be more of a free safety, but man, he really knows how to play. And just watching him this week, in some of the drills, in some of the practices, this is just a football player. Forget, if you're looking for an an out of this world type athlete, Riley Moss is not your guy. But he's really smooth in his footwork. He's really well coached. He's really instinctive in coverage. And this is a guy kind of like Hufanga, who just forget the measurables. The guy is a football player. And he just makes a lot of plays. Now, I don't know that he's quick enough to hang with NFL corners outside as a corner, but maybe he's a slot corner. He's definitely a really smart player. He might be a free safety. But I just think Riley Moss, in a game where the NFL uses the sub package, 70% of the time, and you got all kinds of DBs on the field at all times, Riley Moss from Iowa is somebody that you got to see. I mean, you got to see. He's just a total pros pro. And if you watched Iowa football, they had a horrendous offense, but a killer defense. And he was one of the main reasons why. So he stood out to me this week. Brock Purdy's old teammate, the Iowa State edge rusher, Will McDonald IV, really jumped out to me this week. I mean, and this guy's an incredible athlete. He's going to test very well in Indy, I would imagine. He's a little bit on the thin side. He weighs probably right around 240 pounds, maybe 245, something like that. They weighed in at the in season around 235. But I guess they weighed him at the Senior Bowl at over 240 pounds. And he's athletic. I mean, he's really athletic, and he's a really interesting pass rusher. You can never have enough edge rushers. And I think Will McDonald IV is going to be somebody to really watch for. The Niners are looking for an offensive tackle. And, this is a really tough spot to fill, because typically it's very difficult to get an offensive tackle that can play. in the NFL. But Darnell Wright from Tennessee is a really exciting prospect. Some people like him as a guard. I kind of like him as a tackle. Probably not a left tackle, more of a right tackle. But if you're looking at Mike McGlinchey moving on in free agency, and I think that's probably pretty likely, a guy like Darnell Wright might be an interesting name for the 49ers. And he showed out, I thought, this week in Mobile. The guy who absolutely I thought had the highlight of the week, and he's another guy who's probably going to be a day 3 pick, and that is, and I don't want to butcher his name, but he's the Northwestern defensive lineman, Abarawar, Abarawar, let's see, try it again, Abatamwa, Abarawar, and I'll tell you, watching this guy, he's not the biggest guy. But he is just an unbelievable leverage player. They listed him this week at 6'1", 285 pounds. So he's kind of a tweener, right? He's not really a tackle. He's not really an end. What he is a sub package pass rusher. But man, he looked good in practice. I mean, functional strength for days. Thursday, I'm looking at him, and I'm watching some of that practice film and the one-on-ones behind, that they do behind with the O lineman going against the D lineman. And this guy has to be seen to be believed. I mean, he's really, really good. Tons of power. I mean, he had a bull rush that you can find online against the Notre Dame interior lineman, Jarrett Patterson. And Patterson's got good functional strength, and it was a really good player for the Irish. He takes Patterson and he put him on roller skates, and Abarawar waltz Patterson about, I would say, 10 to 12 yards into the backfield, right into the quarterback's lap. I've seen this drill done for years, and I don't see that many guys who just blow the offensive lineman right off the ball. And it was like the offensive lineman had no ability to anchor. He had no strength at all. I mean, this guy is, what position does he play? That's a TBD. I would say he's probably a 3 technique, which is, he's an interior player for sure. I don't think he's a 3-4 defensive end. I don't think he's a 5 technique, 3-4 end who's gonna, I don't think he's a 2 gapper. I think he's a penetrator, but he doesn't have incredible moves right now. But what he does have is the ability to just get off the ball, get low, and just play with power and force. I mean, it's really something. They say he's going to be a top 5 pick, or a top 100 pick. I mean, I should say not top 5, top 100. So he's probably going to be there in the 3rd round. But man, I mean, I have a hard time saying his name, but I will not have a hard time remembering this player. He's really, really fun to watch. Really special. And I thought he really stood out this weekend in Mobile, and just not just this weekend, but also in the practices leading up. I thought he was a guy that kind of stood out. Another guy that we really got to talk about is there was a strong local flavor to the Senior Bowl this year. And I thought, I did the Stanford pregame show for really the last 10 years or so. And Stanford has a very, under David Shaw, they had a very conservative run some more type offense. When the rest of the nation was going hurry up and spread and, spreading things out and throwing the ball all over the place, Stanford ran the ball while teams are running to the line of scrimmage, trying to play with, at a breakneck pace. Stanford played a very slow, deliberate pace. So they really played opposite of the way most teams play. And when you play a certain style, it either benefits or works at the detriment of certain players. I thought one guy who's a hell of a player for Stanford is Michael Wilson. And I thought he was one of the best players I saw in Mobile this week. I mean, great route runner, really solid football player. He's had some injuries, but he wasn't featured a lot in Stanford's offense. And, he's got strong hands. He's competitive. He's probably going to be a day 3 pick. But, you're talking about a guy with good size and good movement ability. I mean, I don't know what he's going to run, but Michael Wilson was a productive player in the Pac-12, and he's got good size. So that was the first Stanford player that stood out to me, and I expected Michael Wilson to be, I thought he would be like a late day 3 pick. Now it sounds like Michael Wilson may wind up being a high day 3 pick. So he was a guy that stood out. The other Stanford player that really stood out to me was Caillou Blue Kelly, the corner, who, he's really a good player, good corner with size. He's tough. He's got tremendous instincts. He's smart. Caillou Blue Kelly is a really, really good collegiate football player, and I don't know how he's going to test, but I love the way he looked in the practices. And I mean, in the one-on-one drills, he mirrored guys up and down the field. He might have been the most talented cover guy on his team at the Senior Bowl. So he definitely improved his draft stock in Mobile. And a lot of people think Caillou Blue Kelly may wind up being maybe a second round pick, maybe high third. But, the 49ers, I believe, have 3 picks in the third round, and they're going to be looking for a corner, you would think. And Caillou Blue Kelly from Stanford is definitely an interesting player. Now, I've talked a lot already about how I think it's kind of time for us to look for a replacement, I think, for Javon Kinlaw. And just that Kinlaw he really doesn't give you much right now. He looks like a ton, getting off the bus, he looks awesome, but he doesn't really consistently anchor against the run. We know he's never really been a pass rusher. So, I mean, that's really it. I mean, if you can't rush the passer and you don't anchor against the run, you're not getting a lot done. Well, there was a guy this week that I saw that would be a really, really good, 2-gap Kinlaw replacement, and that's Jared Clark, who's 6'3", 300 and close to 350 pounds. And my buddy, Rick Mueller, who I worked with in the Canadian League, has been the recruiting coordinator at Coastal Carolina. And Coastal Carolina's had some big-time players, man. And Jared Clark out of Coastal Carolina is a huge force. I mean, he's not much of a pass rusher. He's a first and second down player. He's not going to give you a ton of moves. He doesn't have a lot of moves. But if you're talking about an immovable 2-gapper who can can absolutely, shut down the A gaps against the run, dominate on first and second down, give you a little bull rush, maybe replace a Javon Kinlaw, Jared Clark, remember that name, out of Coastal Carolina. I think he's going to be another day 3 pick that's going to be a real surprise for a lot of people. Now, one guy who I think is great value, and I know the Niners like Jake Brendel, but man, the Michigan center who won the Outland Trophy and Olusegun Olawatimi, he is incredibly strong. I mean, I saw him battling with the Wisconsin defensive tackle, Keanu Benton, and Benton's a house. Benton's really strong at the point. And I felt like Olawatimi, there you go. Olusegun Olawatimi was getting the better of him at the, Olawatimi is just really, really strong. Now they're saying Olawatimi may go in the 4th or 5th round. I mean, the 49ers have 3 picks in the 5th round. If the Outland Trophy winner out of Michigan, who can play center and I think maybe a little bit of guard, if he's on the board in day 3 of the draft, that's got to be one of the great steals, I think, out there. That one really stands out to me. And then the Miami cornerback, Tyreek Stevenson. He got hurt later in the week, but man, I saw him early in the week, and I've liked Stevenson all year from Miami. He's a terrific corner. I mean, rangy, cocky, confident corner who can shut receivers down and mirror them up and down the field. I love the confidence of Tyreek Stevenson. There was one receiver, it wasn't a banner year for receivers, but there was one receiver that, well, really a couple receivers, but one receiver, big receiver that stood out was the Michigan State receiver, Jaden Reed, who, man, in the one-on-ones, he looked great. I mean, this guy can really move. I mean, really move. For a guy who, who's got good size, he moves really, really well. So I really liked what I saw out of him. I mean, you're talking about this guy separates at will, and he's a big bodied receiver. We're talking about 6'4", pretty good weight. And he's a downfield guy. I mean, I didn't think of Michigan State as a downfield passing attack, but Jaden Reed looked like a guy who could be fantastic down the field.